Mm-hmm.
And that's when I started to look at creativity again and recognize, oh, okay, creativity is more about just art. It's a skill, it's something we can develop. Most of us have been told we're not creative. And so I really got into that. But meanwhile, I was developing my skills as a facilitator, and I was doing a lot of work with teams and team development. And so those two things kind of, in my 20s sort of grew up next to each other, but I wasn't infusing them very much until probably in my 30s after I started my business and had a little more freedom of how to approach my work. And I
Yeah,
started infusing the team development with the creativity and started
that's
working with
cool.
teams
I
and
love
helping.
that. I
Yeah,
love that. And the other thread that was in there was nature, right? You were in
true.
Steamboat out in nature. And I think that's another place where we can really find our creativity that guides us there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, because we get out of our head and actually into our bodies and stuff comes up for us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And I
yeah,
still
yeah.
do a fair bit with
Yeah.
nature.
Hello, my extraordinary women friends. Have you ever told yourself, I'm just not the creative type? My guest today is about to shift that belief. Dr. Amy Climer is a creativity and innovation expert who has worked with powerhouse organizations like the Mayo Clinic and Stanford. But what she shares with us in this conversation is deeply relevant to entrepreneurs growing soul aligned businesses. Today, we're going to talk about what it really means to lead with creativity, the surprising habits that unlock innovation, and how to clear the hidden blocks that get in the way of fresh thinking. If you are ready to spark some new ideas, lead more powerfully, and bring more creative energy into how you grow and serve, this conversation is for you. Let's meet Amy Climer. Well, welcome to Extraordinary Women Radio, Amy. It is great to have you here today.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about creativity, and that's a really fun thing to be talking about. I remember when I came out of the corporate world probably 17 years ago, I would say that I don't have a creative bone in my body. I said that. Um, and then I went and I took one of the, I don't know, one of the quizzes that were out there. I can't remember what it was called, but it came back that I was like 85% right brained and creative thinker. And I was like, what? What? And where did that come from? And so it's just such a funny thing. We have this whole perception around creativity. Isn't that, do you run into that all the time? People saying, I don't feel like I have a creative bone in my body.
Absolutely. I would be thrilled if I never heard that phrase again. But it is funny how it's like that phrase, people say all the time. And I'm like, no, actually, you have 206 of them, but
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like I gave that saying away a long time ago,
yeah.
but I also know it's like such an important part of when we're looking at our businesses and growing our businesses. It's such an important part. But I want to start with you. I want to really dive into hearing how how creativity really became your calling. What's the story behind that?
Wow. Yeah, there's definitely like several layers,
Mhm.
but when I was even as far back as high school, I can remember I'm not sure what it was, but I cared about creativity. I don't know that I could have
Ooh,
said it in that way.
yeah, yeah.
But when my friends said, "Oh no, I'm not creative," I'm like, "What? Yes, you are!" And I would get really emphatic about it. And I didn't really know what I was talking about, but I just felt like, no, everyone has this potential to be creative.
Hmm.
And fast forward college, I didn't. I mean, when I it felt to me like I was doing nothing creative. Right?
Okay.
I have
What
a
was your
biology.
degree path? What was the pathway that took you through college?
I have a biology degree.
Okay, so yeah,
Yeah, and
very linear.
fairly linear. Yeah, and,
Yeah.
and actually, my freshman year of college, I took this class called Studio Art for Non-Majors,
Hmm.
and I was really excited about this class. It satisfied one of those general education requirements. And the first day of class, the professor said, "Listen, if you don't have if you don't have an artistic talent, you are not going to do well in this class." And I remember
Mm.
thinking, "Wait a minute, this is a class for non-art majors."
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what, whatever. I'm just going to stick it out and see what happens.
Yeah.
And that teacher spent an entire semester berating all of us I
Oh,
mean, we
geez.
actually kind of bonded because he was so ridiculous. And anyway, I left that class and I was like, okay, that's it. I'm done. And I didn't do anything artistic or creative, didn't really think about creativity. And then after college, about a year or two later, I was in a bookstore actually in Colorado in Steamboat Springs.
Oh, okay.
And I was doing some work out there. I was a wilderness instructor. I was
Oh,
leading these like,
cool.
yeah. And anyway, so I go into this bookstore on a day off and I stumble upon The Artist's Way,
Oh, I
which,
love that book.
right, like
Yeah.
life-changing book for many
Mm-hmm.
people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I started to look at creativity again and recognize, oh, okay, creativity is more about just art. It's a skill, it's something we can develop. Most of us have been told we're not creative. And so I really got into that. But meanwhile, I was developing my skills as a facilitator and I was doing a
Mm-hmm.
lot of work with teams and team development. And so those two things kind of, in my 20s sort of grew up next to each other, but
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't infusing them very much until probably in my 30s after I started my business and had a little more freedom of how to approach my work. And I
Yeah.
started infusing the team development with the creativity and started
That's
working with
cool.
teams
I
and
love
helping.
that. I
Yeah,
love that. And the other thread that was in there was nature, right? You were in
it's true.
Steamboat out in nature. And I think that's another place where we can really find our creativity that guides us there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we get out of our head and actually into our bodies and stuff comes up for us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
do a fair bit with nature.
Yeah.
I work with this organization called Outward Bound.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, do you know
Oh,
Outward
that's
Bound?
awesome.
Yeah.
That's totally awesome. So you say that creativity doesn't happen by accident.
Mhm.
What does that look like in practice?
Well, if you look at people who are highly creative,
Yeah,
which I really believe all of us have this incredible potential, but if we look at the people that are highly creative, they're actually very intentional about it. They're very
they are.
deliberate.
Hmm.
And if we just pay attention to what they're doing, they've developed a process, they've learned how to tap into that. They are not sitting around waiting for inspiration to strike.
Yeah.
I have there's a acquaintance, a colleague that I know who has written, I think at this point it's like 70 books.
Oh, wow.
I mean, she is not
Wow.
sitting
That's just
around.
crazy.
I know, it's like mind-boggling. She writes four or
Took
five
me
a
a
year.
long time to write one book.
Exactly. I mean, clearly she has this system down,
So it's just
right?
going, it's coming from, it's just flowing from her.
Yeah. Right. And I'm sure I haven't, these are mostly, fiction, kind of like
Hmm.
Harlequin romance type
Uh-huh.
books. And I haven't read them, but, I'm sure there's a pattern to it,
Yeah.
but it's the same thing for someone who's, whether they're an artist, whether they're an inventor, whatever it is, they are intentionally showing up and doing the work. And
Yeah.
that's when creativity happens, is when we show up and do the work.
So how do you do that in your business? So like when you're wanting more creativity, either for your clients or for yourself, what are some of the things what's some of the foundation you put into place?
Hmm. I think the first is making time for it, which of course
Hmm.
is what everyone complains they don't have.
Right.
But here's an example. Right now, I am in the process of developing an online course that
Hmm.
coincides with my new book.
Hmm.
And just today I was working on it and I blocked off on my calendar, 2 to 3 hours. I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to work on this course. I mean, I can think of 100 other things that I would rather do, right? I mean,
Right.
I
Right.
enjoy the course, but still, there's so many other
Yeah.
distractions. But
And
for me,
distractions is a big word, right? Because you, in those 3 hours you've set aside, you could go in 100 different directions really easily.
yeah. And for me, I find it incredibly helpful to have a stack of blank paper and a nice
Ooh,
pen.
interesting. I like this.
And I don't get on my computer. I mean, I might have
Hmm.
my computer there, but I'm actually designing the course on paper.
Hmm.
And if I start designing on the computer, it's just like
It
the
gets
ideas get blocked.
different. I agree with that. Is when you can, I use sticky notes a lot that way, right? It's
Mhm.
like, it's like, because you can move them around and you can start to like, oh, what about this idea? And where might it fit in the mix of all of this?
Yeah.
So time, and then using pen and paper versus going straight to a computer is an
Yeah.
important part of that.
And I think that's just what I've figured out for my process for the type of
Hmm.
work that I'm doing.
Hmm.
Um, uh, I also know that I am someone that has a lot of ideas and I like
Hmm.
implementing. But what I
Yeah.
don't really thrive with is like developing the ideas. So there's a step between idea and implementation, that development. And that is a place that I really struggle. And so knowing that about myself, I
Yeah.
know this is where the pen and paper comes in. I'm like duct tape myself to the seat, metaphorically, and I'm like, okay, I'm going.
Yeah.
And that's what works for me. And sometimes it's 15 minutes,
Yeah.
15 minutes of
Yeah.
doing that, and then boom, I
Yeah.
can get started in implementing and the ideas flow. But um yeah, I think, first of all, you got to get out of email and get into this other
Yeah.
mode.
One of the things I've noticed recently is, well, I've been writing more, and I love to write. I've always loved to write, but I gave up writing a blog years ago, and I was just
Yeah.
like, oh, it was just one of those things that, and I really love going back into the creativity process of writing more often on a weekly
Mm,
basis, putting a newsletter out.
nice.
And again, it's that time, just setting a bit of
Yeah.
time and, what's going to come through me this week, what's happened this week, what ideas are sparked, what conversations have I had, and just kind of playing with it and, letting that unfold. And it can be really, I've been having a lot of fun just getting back into writing a weekly newsletter.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about creativity blockers. What gets in the way of our innovative thinking that, when we're on this roll, but something pops up for us and keeps us from letting that come forth.
Oh my gosh, there's so many things that block our creativity. One second. I think one of the things that both I mean, any of these blockers, right? We can turn around and make them kind of an assister or um, a catalyst, right? So time is
Right.
certainly one of them, and
Mm-hmm.
not setting aside the time
Yeah.
and not managing our time well.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. One of the things that I never would have really anticipated that I do end up talking with teams quite a bit is how are you managing your tasks and your time, and what's your project management process? And I
Okay.
think this definitely applies to entrepreneurs of, do you have a really solid project management and time management process, or are you every day buried in 1,000 emails? And
Yeah.
I actually was just today reading up and doing a little research on, how to get some help with my inbox, because that's
Yeah.
something that I'm struggling with a
The
bit.
monotony of something, right? Where you're like
Yeah,
just doing something over and over again and getting sucked back into it can really deaden that, I would think.
exactly. And
Yeah.
if we're doing that, processing emails is like a pretty low level
Yeah.
thinking,
Yeah.
right? And we
Yeah.
really need to be able to move into this higher level thinking where this is where our creativity can really shine and
Uh-huh.
thrive.
Uh-huh.
And so we need to set aside time for that. It doesn't have to be a lot of time. It could be an hour
Yeah.
or two,
Yeah.
even once a week would be
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
But that's one of the mistakes I see is a blocker that many people, complain about or haven't quite figured out. Um,
Yeah.
I think too, another blocker is just our own belief about our
Mhm.
creativity, kind of what you were
Mhm.
mentioning before of like, oh no, I
Mhm.
don't have a creative bone in my body.
Yeah.
And there's actually some research that when you believe you're more creative, you
Yeah.
will produce more creative results.
Yeah.
And so this great self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you can start seeing yourself as creative and recognizing that creativity is really about solving problems in new
Mhm.
ways.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a way no one else has done before. It's just new to you, to this context with this client, whatever the situation is. But if you can solve a problem in a new way, that's creativity. And my
Yeah.
guess is every single person listening has done that.
Yeah, totally.
I mean,
When you think about what's going on in our world around us right now, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of stuff coming at
yeah,
us. And I think that creativity could be one of those things that helps us move through this in a way
mhm,
that it gets us into a different energy. It gets us into bigger thinking. It takes us out of like, kind of all the noise and all the stuff at the foundation into a different space. So can you talk a little bit about that?
yeah, there's definitely a lot of noise that we're
Mm-hmm.
experiencing right now. And I
Yeah.
think, even something as simple as going on social media,
Yeah.
whatever your
Yeah.
vice of choice is,
Yeah.
TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, there's a certain element of that that could provide some inspiration.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it pretty quickly tips over into just mind numbing, not helping at all.
Yeah.
Like one
Yeah.
of the things that I've done is personally for my Instagram feed, I don't actually follow very many people I know. I
Hmm.
almost exclusively follow artists.
Oh,
And
interesting.
and and it's like, okay, I'm going to connect with my friends on Facebook or colleagues on LinkedIn or whatever, but Instagram, I just decided to approach it a little different. And so it really changes the tenor of when I'm there.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing any political posts there
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and so I think just trying to be conscientious about that, about how
The
you're,
spaces you're creating that puts the right the right content there for you that's going to uplift you, right, versus
exactly.
kind of pull you into the mud.
Right, which I think that's a great phrase, pull you into the mud. I feel like
Yeah.
that's sort of where most social media has gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think just being really careful about, and social media, I'm just using as an example. It could be anything. It could be
Yeah.
news. It could be
Yeah.
conversations you're having with friends who tend to be, real complainers or
Yeah.
downers or, yeah.
So really paying attention to what's coming in at it, what's the information coming at us, and keeping it. And I've heard this, keeping our brain clean, keeping our,
Mhm.
what's going on here, because what's coming at us is going to, be what's going on in our brains. And if a lot's coming at our brains, we're not really able to keep that clean space for creativity to have be nourished, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think having like some quiet space is important, whether
Yeah.
it's, every day or once a week or, kind of depends on
What's
what,
your rhythm that you do with for yourself?
well, I'll be honest, this year, I've been struggling a little bit
Hmm.
because I just published this book
Yeah.
and until today, I didn't have an assistant, as
Yeah.
we talked
You
about
do
before.
now,
So
though.
I know, so excited. And so I was getting buried a little bit. And about 2 weeks ago, I decided, okay, I cannot start working until 9 a.m.,
Yep.
which is so ridiculous that that was like the goal that I was like,
Hmm.
basically I would just wake up and start working. And
Yeah.
as soon as I did that,
That's
it
a
was
really
about two
good
weeks
one.
ago, I could just feel like the creativity coming back slowly.
Yeah.
Like if I wake up at 6 or 7, or it kind of varies, I try not to set an alarm. Um, then I'd had all this space all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And I started journaling a little bit more and just doing some various things in the morning that were helping me just like have some space
Yeah.
before I just jumped right in. And I could feel this shift. It's
It
actually,
definitely makes a huge shift to be able to make space for yourself. I don't do meetings before 10. I mean, that's
yeah.
my, I will often be at my computer before 10, but I don't do meetings before
Hmm.
10. And so if I'm coming here to be at my desk, it's for, it's like, okay, where's my day going to go? And, making that kind of space. And I think you have to be intentional with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've worked with major organizations like the Mayo Clinic and Stanford. I mean, kudos. That's awesome. And what have you learned about creative leadership that can from organizations of that size
Mm.
that can really apply to entrepreneurs and even boutique sized teams? So, what are some of the lessons that you've seen at the very large company size
Mhm.
that can go down to an entrepreneur size?
Yeah. I think one of the things and this varies across large companies. I think some of
Hmm.
them are very good at this and some are really bad at this.
Yeah.
But the effort they put into developing their leaders, I see make a
Hmm.
big difference. And actually, Mayo Clinic is organization that's very good at that. They put a lot of work into that and a lot of focus
Nice.
into that. And there's another organization that I just did a little bit of work with recently, a large international organization that it just seemed like they weren't putting much into their leaders.
Hmm.
And there was this like frenetic pace that they were keeping.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing is like, do you have, even if you're a large organization, do you have a pace that's slow enough that people can actually make changes?
Yeah.
And I think that's something entrepreneurs can
That's
think
a
about.
really good question.
Yeah, I think we think we need to change really fast,
Yeah.
but then I think that just increases the resistance and decreases the effectiveness.
Yeah.
And I catch myself doing this as an entrepreneur. Like, at the beginning of the year, I'm setting my goals for the year, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this and this and this. And then June comes, I'm like, oh, I've barely gotten through one of these big projects, because
Yeah.
it just, it's like you're looking at a candy shop or something at the beginning of the year, and at the midway through, you're like, oh gosh, I'm having a stomach ache.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I'm pretty big on with working with my clients when they're planning out their year. I'm like, okay, you're going to only have 2 or 3 initiatives in that
yep.
first quarter, and you're going to spread the rest of them out throughout the rest of the year because you can't do them all at once, or you do feel like that. So I think what you're saying though with organizations like this is, do they even have the culture that they can slow down and pause, because that pause is such an important part of this process. Um,
Yeah.
what do you see happening, for companies right now? I mean, as you've got clients that are, all over the world, what do you see there? I mean, what are they pulling you in for in the mix of, to this day and age right now? What's top of mind for your clients when it comes to bringing creativity? Why do they want more creativity in their businesses?
I think that they see the reason they want more creativity in their business is that they see that this is what they need in order to continue to make changes and to, depending on the type of business, maybe they're trying to
Hmm.
stay ahead of the competition, or maybe they're
Uh-huh.
trying to make more positive change. Um,
But change
but
is a key thread through that, right? That's what
yeah,
I'm hearing.
exactly. And,
Interesting.
I think with, I mean, this maybe is a little bit outdated right now, but when COVID hit in 2020, it was a great little case study in what organizations, like some organizations thrived,
Yeah.
you know, they like saw what was going on. They made some changes. Some of those changes they made, they've been planning to make for a long time and hadn't gotten around to it.
Yeah.
And they make these changes and they end up really thriving. And
Yeah.
other organizations, like, oh, we're just going to ride this out, or
Right.
no, I'm not going online, or, I saw restaurants where I live are like, oh, we're not doing delivery. That's not our thing.
Yeah.
Like, suit yourself.
Yeah.
But the organizations that understood how to be innovative and they knew how to lead change, they thrived,
Yeah.
and they're doing really well now.
Yeah.
And, hopefully we don't have another global pandemic anytime soon,
Yeah.
but there
But
will
we've
be
got other
something.
things, right? And I think
Exactly.
there's always change happening around us. And so I think innovation can be that superpower to moving through change,
Yeah.
to be
And it was
able to pause
interesting.
and say, what do we need here?
Yeah. And it was interesting because during COVID, no, that if March, April 2020, everyone was so stressed. Nobody wanted to learn about innovation because at that point it's too late. You need to already know.
That's
And
fascinating.
yeah, and it's I think that's one of the things that clients are talking with me now, like, okay, let's get this process down and let's get good at this. Let's learn how, because innovation is a process, and if you follow the process, you can be innovative anytime you need to. And
Yeah.
it's really remarkable. I find it is a superpower, like you say, if
Yeah.
organizations can tap into that.
Yeah, that's cool. That's very cool. And if somebody's, it's like if you're in the midst of change, doesn't mean it's too late that you cannot implement creativity and innovation, but you're going to have to slow down and pause and bring that, give that space for it to be nurtured.
Yeah, and I think sometimes slowing down and pausing doesn't mean a long time always.
Yeah,
It
that's a
could
good
literally
point.
be like, let's just take an hour right now.
Yeah.
Let's generate some ideas. Let's not. I was talking to somebody, a colleague recently, and not somebody I know very well. And we were like having drinks, and she was telling about her team, and we were talking about generating ideas. And I said, when you when you're having sort of a brainstorming session and people share ideas, I kind of said something that she's like, wait, what? And she said her team, when they're trying to come up with ideas, whatever idea somebody shares first, they go with that idea.
Interesting.
And I was like, wait, what? You never like go to the second idea? And she said, no, it never occurred to us to keep going. And it was this like really adorable sort of innocent moment on her part where she was like, oh my gosh, we should get more than one idea.
Yeah. And let the ideas flow, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, um, and again, it doesn't have to be a lot of time. I mean, even 15 minutes might be
Yeah.
enough. Like, let's push past that. Let's get 10 ideas before we make a decision, even if they're
Yeah.
completely ridiculous and wacky,
Yeah.
because sometimes that leads to really cool things.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
I love it. I totally love it. Okay. What's a time you've applied creative thinking in your own business that really made a big difference in the growth for you?
Hmm. I think a number of years ago, about 12 years ago, early on in my business, I developed this product called Climer cards. I'll
Uh-huh.
show. I know some people are not seeing this on the video, but if you are, it's this little simple deck of cards that is designed for facilitators and trainers to use um, if they want to deepen conversation with a group.
Oh, cool.
And the deck is all these different, like, kind of simple, iconic images. They're all watercolor paintings that I did.
Uh-huh.
It's like a spool of thread and an elephant and a cactus and just all sorts of things.
Right.
And the way you use them is you lay them out on the table and you ask a question, and then everyone picks a card in response to the question. So the question might be like, pick a card that represents one way you want to be more creative in this next year.
Okay.
And then people pick a
And they get an
card.
elephant.
Right. And it could be something, metaphoric that
Mm-hmm.
elephant
Yep.
sparks an idea for them. Right.
Yep.
So anyway, a number of years ago, I'd made this deck and I just made it for myself
Yeah.
and I'm using it with a group. And we ended up having this phenomenal conversation that literally it was all women and literally people were in tears and just these huge breakthroughs. And um, so we wrap up this conversation and we're outside. And so we're walking to this next activity we're going to do. It's kind of a team building day.
Mm-hmm.
And the client was a friend of mine. Her name is Sarah. And Sarah said to me, Amy, those cards you created are really cool. Have you ever thought about doing something with them?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, what do you mean? And she's like, like so other people could use them. And
I'm already looking at them thinking I want a deck.
yeah, and it was so fascinating because I had not thought of that. And
You were
so
just
it
using
was,
them for yourself.
yeah, I just made them for myself. And actually the deck that I had made were pretty bad. They're a lot better now. But they worked. They're really quite profound. So anyway, I decided to dig into this and learn how to
Yeah.
get these manufactured. I launched it on Kickstarter.
Uh-huh.
Are you familiar with Kickstarter?
Yep. Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. So this was back in 2012. So
Uh-huh.
Kickstarter was pretty young and it was successful, got it funded. And I thought, oh, I'm going to sell 500 decks and this will be a fun little project.
Uh-huh.
Well, I sold the 500 decks and then people kept placing orders and I had to order more. Anyway, it's now been 12, 13 years and I don't know how many I've sold, but they've been used in almost 60 countries. Every year I sell more than the previous year. And I really kind of followed the creative process
Yeah.
from very beginning to end as I was creating that deck.
Oh God, that's a
And
brilliant story.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it's really
And,
fun.
and and you created it for yourself to start with, which I love, that you actually took the time to say, okay, this is a fun way for me to really look at my creativity, but then look what it turned into.
Mhm.
So cool. I'm definitely gonna have to order a deck of those. Those look awesome.
Nice,
That's
thanks.
that's so awesome. So we've talked about rituals and habits. Okay, this is the last creativity question here. If our listeners could walk away with one creative shift that would unlock something new in their business, what would it be?
Mm. One of the mantras that I've developed in my work as I've learned more and more about creativity is be deliberate to be creative.
Mm,
And it's something that I wrote a lot about in my new book, Deliberate Creative Teams.
yeah,
And I think that if the one thing you could do is be deliberate about how you're spending your time and how you're, setting aside time to be more creative. And if you do that one thing, I think you'll see pretty profound results.
that's awesome. I love it. So tell us a bit about your book. What prompted you to write it?
Um, well, the book is based on, I guess, two things. The foundation is the research I did for my dissertation a number of years
Mm-hmm.
ago and
Mm-hmm.
understanding what teams need in order to be creative together.
Mm-hmm.
And then I finished that in 2016. And so then I've been applying it for the last decade with my clients. And I partly wrote the book. I've been wanting to do it for a long time, but people kept asking me, "Oh, where can I buy your book?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't have one." Like, "Wait, what?" We'd get in a conversation and they'd be curious. And so I felt like people were asking for the book. I'm like, "Okay, I will write the book."
Yeah.
And it was a big endeavor, but I'm really proud of it. I'm excited about it. I've gotten just amazing positive feedback. It's only been out as of this recording 3 months, not even three,
Awesome.
2.5.
Congratulations. It's a big deal. It's definitely a big
Thank
deal
you.
to get that, to birth a book. And
Yes.
yeah, I get that. Where can our listeners get that, get your cards, and just tell us where they can learn more about you?
Yeah. You can learn more about me and my work at climerconsulting.com. And Climer is spelled Climer. And you can find Climer cards on there or just go directly to climercards.com. And you can get the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere books are sold, or
Yeah.
on the website.
Cool, cool, cool. And the final question I always close with are, what are three pearls of wisdom you'd like to leave with us today?
3. Oh, this is like high
Three.
stakes. Hmm. I think, well, one, if I could be repetitive, is be deliberate to be creative.
Yeah,
It won't happen by accident.
yeah.
I think another one, I'm thinking about one of my favorite quotes, which is from Marianne Williamson in her book, A Return to Love. And it's a passage, so I won't remember the whole thing, but um, I think it's so important for us to let our own light shine and to
Mm-hmm.
share that light, because when we do, we give other people permission to do the same.
Yeah,
And that to me feels very empowering, that by letting my own light shine and being myself and coming into myself, that I might just help someone else by example. And
yeah.
I love
Totally. I love that one too.
that. I guess the last one is just do good in the world.
Yes.
We
We
need
need lots of that right now.
we need lots of good.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Well, Amy, this has been delightful. Thank you for all your good wisdom on creativity. I know I'm inspired and looking forward to even bringing more creativity into the work that I get to do. And my mind's already going, it's like, oh, I could do some things in the mastermind
Ooh,
communities. And, like, so
I love it. That's
you've got
awesome.
ideas sparked for me. And it's great meeting you and spending time with you. And thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here.
You bet.